I'm pretty sure that all of us can think of certain family moments that are forever engraved in our memories, for better or for worse. And one of mine is a day when I was at my family home north of Boston, Massachusetts, visiting my dad and my sister, and I was in the kitchen chatting with them both, and I was hungry for a snack. And of course, I simply reached down while I was talking, not even looking, because after all, the potato chips had been in that same cabinet since I was a kid. And so I reached down for them, still chatting with my father, and I grabbed the bag, I opened it up, I stuffed a few chips in my mouth, and I heard myself say, "Whoa, what's this? Something's very wrong." And my sister, in a newfound devotion to healthy nutrition in our home, said, "Get used to it, Rich. They're salt-free chips. Too much sodium is very bad for us." To me, needless to say, salt-free also meant taste-free. But my sister, we know, let me not give bad medical advice, my sister, of course, was right about the danger of excessive salt. We read articles about it all the time. Salt makes a difference, for better or for worse, and one must think about salt, especially when in the gospel, Jesus tells us we're to be salt and we're to be light. Jesus knew what he was doing when he told the crowds in this section of the Sermon on the Mount that they'd better be salt if they were going to live according to his way. They must be salt, salt of the earth, the Lord said. Now, in the ancient world, salt was highly valued, believe it or not. I suspect it was three qualities of salt that led Jesus to use this metaphor to give us a lesson in Christian discipleship. First, salt suggests purity. Just think of salt in a bowl or on a plate, kind of shining in the light, sparkling, huh? Second, salt is about preservation from corruption. That's why it's been used to preserve foods from ancient times. And third, of course, back to the potato chips, salt is for flavor. Now, translate that into discipleship terms. That's what Jesus wants us to do. In a world, one could argue, of ever lower moral standards in some ways, the authentic disciple of Jesus Christ wants to remain untainted, unstained, unpolluted, to use the words of the Beatitudes, pure of heart, in midst of all the things around us, and to help others be the same. And then we look at salt's use as a preservative. It kills bacteria and is still used to keep food from going bad. How about beef jerky, for example, which I don't like one bit. Give me the potato chips and I'm happy. Or pickles, or salt cod, bacalao. The Christian keeps a healthy soul, a mind and will resistant to the pollution of toxic values, and wants to help other people do the same, to preserve what we are in Christ, to preserve his wonderful saving message, and to help one another with that. We want to have, in a way, in the way we live our lives, a culturally antiseptic effect. Help people see, sort of the values microbes that are trying to get at them that can be dangerous for us. And we want to help other people in our lives be sound, humanly and spiritually. And of course, thirdly, salt is about flavor. Christianity, as we translate the salt flavor into discipleship, Christianity is meant to lend flavor to life. Joy, serenity, celebration, as we're doing right now, hope, courage, zest. It's a shame that some people view religion in general and Christianity as something that robs life of flavor. Sadly, Oliver Wendell Holmes said this, and it's funny in a way, but it's sad in a way. He said, "I might have entered the ministry if certain clergymen I knew had not looked and acted so much like undertakers." Now, I know a lot of joy-filled undertakers, so we don't want to besmirch the reputation of undertakers, but you know what he means, a certain kind of heavy solemnity sometimes. People need to see some sparkle in us who are Christians, some joy, some lightness of spirit, born of confidence in God's wonderful love and mercy, even though Christianity is also serious business in terms of how we live. And there's one final thing about salt. Salt stimulates our appetite. A salty Christian, in the best sense of the word, attracts other people to Christ and to his gospel. A zesty disciple who's on fire with joy and hope because he or she belongs to Christ is an evangelizer, someone who attracts people to the good news of Jesus. So that takes care of the salt, and the only other thing is the light. Jesus says you've got to be salt of the earth and light of the world. Now, this one is really a great compliment to us because in asking us to be light in the world, Jesus is summoning us to be what he said he himself is. When Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Come out of the darkness and live in my light." And Jesus tells us that he wants us to be what he is. Now that's a pretty demanding challenge, it seems to me, but it's from the Lord, so we have to pay attention to it. But our light that he asks us to be is really only meant to mirror his light. When you think about the moon has no light of its own. The moon's light, of course, is a reflection of the light of the sun. And we're meant, in our relationship to the light of Christ, to be like the moon and to reflect his light to the world and to one another. So we don't produce our own light. Jesus only asks us that we reflect the radiance of his light, that divine light that shines out from his loving presence in our hearts. To want to do that and to do it well requires intentionality in our discipleship. Intentional Christians is what we have to be. Casual Christianity is dull, boring, and unattractive. As it is with the metaphor of salt, of course, there are discipleship implications in the Lord's choice of the image of light to illustrate his challenge to us who are his followers. And as with the salt, there are three of them, very quickly. First of all, and here's a no-brainer for you, light, of course, is meant to be seen. There's the point. And we see with it, Translation for discipleship: our lives are meant to be seen as somehow different because we belong to Jesus Christ. Witness. Our lives are meant to witness to Christ. As the song from the 1960s put it, they'll know we're Christians by our love. That was said of the very earliest Christians of the first century, as others would look at them. Look how they love each other. I hope that in our lives, people can say that about us as well. They'll know we are Christians by our love, by our joy, by our courage, by our compassion, by our integrity, and our hope. As someone said, there can be no such thing as secret discipleship. Either the secrecy destroys the discipleship, or the discipleship destroys the secrecy. We don't hide our commitment to Jesus Christ. We don't throw it in people's faces either, but we're not afraid to be public Christians. And our Christian witness, and you know this already, should never stop at the church door or the door of this worship space where we gather today. It should be even more evident in our ordinary life and activities in the world, in the way we treat a cashier in a store, the way we order a meal, treat an employee or a coworker, the way we play a game, the way we drive a car, or relate to family and friends and neighbors, and so much more. Those are the nitty-gritty places where our light must shine and our salt be tasty. Second, light is a guide. Buffalo, for those of you who grew up in these parts, Buffalo has been known for a couple of centuries as the city of light, because in 1881, Buffalo had the very first streetlights in the United States. Such a wonderful power source, very close to where we sit right now. What a huge difference, though, back in the 1880s that must have been, huh? When the streets were lighted for the first time. We take lighted streets for granted until we find ourselves on a darkened country road, unsure of where we're headed or how to get there. Christ, of course, is the light that guides our way. And we're called to be the light that guides others. That's part of our Christian duty, most often simply by our example, but sometimes by speaking an encouraging word or even a challenging word. There are good people who lack the courage to take a strong moral stand on their own, even though they want to. But often, if someone with that strength takes the lead, they may well follow. The world needs guiding lights. The world needs you to be guiding lights. And finally, about light, light can be a warning, a caution signal, like a lighthouse. The church, in the tradition of the Hebrew prophets, raises again and again the alarm when something important about humankind is under threat. Whether it's the plight of refugees and immigrants, whether it's the threats to the life of the unborn, or the attack on religious freedom overseas and in our own country, the church tries to be a guide and a warning signal about what the consequences might be if we don't confront these challenges. The light that can be seen, the light that guides, and the light that warns, all of these are the light of Christ, and the light that we can and must be, not to draw attention to ourselves, but to God and to those godly values that build up humankind and make the world a better place. So, Christ's call to be salt and light, the readings chosen by those who planned this liturgy today, Christ's call to be salt and light is really a metaphorical extension of the prophet Micah's statement of God's requirements of us. Micah said what God asks of us is to do the right, to love goodness, and to walk humbly with our God. 3 action words, huh? Do, love, and walk. Do, love, and walk. It's all about faith expressed in action. Leo Tolstoy complained that the Christians of his day in Russia left him unconvinced about Christianity because, and I quote Tolstoy here, he says, because only actions proving their conceptions of life to have destroyed the fear of poverty, illness, and death, so strong in myself, only actions could have convinced me. He was looking for actions, evidence in the lives of Christians that helped make it all credible. So the implications of being light and salt are that the Christian should be just as much a Christian in the home or the workplace as when we're gathered at worship. Just as much so in the factory or the office, the hospital or the classroom, the military base or the courtroom, kitchen, the golf course even, or the voting booth. All of this is our mission territory in this secularized, relativistic, and materialistic culture. We have a big challenge. And how do we live this way? I leave you with this thought. Great Catholic universities are salt and light companies. They produce salt and light in their students, in their faculty, in the whole community. Are we perfect at that? 100% 4.0 gold medal? No, because we all have our own freedom. But what we're about, at the heart of our mission, is to make salt and light in the world, in the way we work with our students and one another. Here at Niagara, one need only look to St. Vincent de Paul, the inspiration of the Vincentian community and of this great university. His image stands before us as we come today to worship. Hear Vincent's words. He says, we must try to be stirred by our neighbor's worries and distress. We must beg God to pour into our hearts sentiments of pity and compassion, and to fill them again and again with these dispositions. It is our duty to prefer the service of the poor to everything else, and to offer such service as quickly as possible. Action. Well, you have much on your minds as you go forth from Niagara University this weekend. Detachment from what has become family for you here. That's never easy. Employment concerns, debt, relationship issues, and more. You will quickly forget the simple thoughts I have just shared with you today. I'm sure I would too, except I've got my notes to remind me. But remember, please, in conclusion, just 4 things. Remember that God loves you passionately, that He is always ready to forgive us, that you can contribute to the world's healing by the way you live, and that you need only recall Vincent de Paul for all the inspiration you need, because his inspiration is Jesus Christ. Congratulations to you and to your families. Best wishes. My promise of prayers for all of you. And in St. Paul's words to the Ephesians proclaimed just a few minutes ago, may God grant you to be strengthened with power through His Spirit in the inner self, and may Christ dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, rooted and grounded in love, may know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, and be filled with all the fullness of God. God bless you all richly and always.